Welcome to the webinar. My name is Jim Tanburn. I coordinate the donor committee, and during this hour we'll have Adam Kessler introducing a bit on the standard, and Sharaz and Harold from the Australian funded market development facility out of Fiji, East Timor and Pakistan. So we're getting their experience from the field. Do please send us your questions in the chat box, and we will try to answer them during the hour as we go along. We've already had 2 or 3, so we'll start with those. But if you have additional questions as we go along, just type them in the chat box. So I think we should get started. This is what we're going to have. We're going to have a short introduction to the donor committee. We'll have a longer introduction to the standard, experience of MDF, and questions, which we've already covered. Donor committee, in a nutshell, a forum for 24 donors and development agencies trying to learn from practice and practical experience to do better all the things that we do in the name of private sector development, which includes market development, business environment reform, partnership mechanisms, and so on. The standard for results measurement came out of, first of all, the feeling by all the members that results measurement is a critical area where we need to do more and better. And also, interestingly, out of a very field-led approach to trying to work out if things are working. And I think this is part of a much larger shift towards working with markets and away from the old days when donors used to be more or less in charge of everything, or at least could dictate broadly what happened. What we have now is a shift to a much more catalytic approach, where development projects aim to have some effect within markets that are much, much bigger than they are. And therefore, every intervention is to some extent experimental, and that makes it even more critical that project managers in particular know whether it's working or not as we go along. So it's not like the old days where we'd wait for 3 or 4 years until the evaluation came up, and then the evaluation would tell us if it was working or if it had worked. With market development programs in private sector, that is way too late. And a lot of project managers have apparently decided that they need to know in real time, which means that now we have probably about 110 projects using the standard around the world, almost entirely at their own initiative, which means it obviously fills a need. One gathers a need that wasn't there a few years ago, and a need that required a framework like the standard. So let me hand over to Adam to tell us a little bit about the standard itself, and then we'll get the voice from the field. Adam.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone.
Hi, I'm not hearing Adam. Can you please mic on?
Hold on, Adam's struggling with his microphone. Let me pass him my laptop and he can talk into my laptop.
Sure.
The microphone's there.
Hello, can you hear me now? Brilliant. Okay, apologies for the technical problem caused by me neglecting to unmute myself. So, let's go on.
Hi Adam, can you repeat your...
Yes, thank you for joining, especially thank you for joining those from Europe, for whom it is extremely early. And we're going to talk briefly about what is the DCED standard. As a quick quick alert, throughout this presentation, we will have brief competition breaks where I'll flash a question up on the screen, and the first person to write the correct answer into the chat box will win the respect of everybody present. So please watch out for those. So what is the DCED standard? The DCED standard is an 8-part framework for effective results measurement, and it's designed to help programs to better measure the results they're achieving, manage their programs to improve their results, and demonstrate this to funders or external stakeholders. And we've done a recent stock take which has found that it's used by about 100 projects in over 50 countries, accounting for about $1.5 billion worth of spend. So it's from small beginnings, it's grown to be an extremely popular framework. And why use the DCED standard? I think the first point is really crucial. It's a practical framework. It wasn't developed by academics or donors, but by market development practitioners trying to find a framework which would help them manage their project. So it is designed to be applicable, not to be theoretical. And if you do use it, then monitoring your project well should help to understand the situation you're in, whether it's rapidly changing, such as a market, and use this information to improve performance by scaling up or improving sections of your project which are going well, changing or dropping things which aren't having the expected results, and using this information at all levels. As well as helping to improve programs, good monitoring information should allow programs to report consistent and credible results. This is particularly important for large programs, perhaps working in different countries and different sectors, which want a way to unify results and aggregate and report across programs. And this credibility is much enhanced if you're, this credibility is much enhanced if you get an external audit of the results measurement system, which we'll talk about in a second. Competition break. What does DCED stand for? Please type into the chat box. Brilliant. We have a winner, Wolfgang. Thank you very much. Donor Committee for Enterprise Development. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so I said that the DCED standard has 8 elements, and I'm just going to briefly run through them. The first element is to develop a results chain. And a results chain is a simple tool. It shows a chain of expected changes from your activities, which are in this slide in pink at the bottom, to the impact, which is in blue at the top. And in this example, if you start off with the activities, building capacity of associations and training retailers, the intermediate steps show what the expected changes in behavior, in knowledge, in attitudes from these retailers, from these associations, from farmers, from others who will affect whether you reach this impact of increasing the income of poor farmers. And after saying what changes you expect to see, you will look at what assumptions you are making in saying you will get from one step to the other. So the reason for this is partly to help improve program design and clarity. So by setting down these expected changes and the assumptions you're making, you give yourself the time to interrogate these assumptions and say, is this really realistic? Do I have evidence that this is likely to happen? What evidence do I need? And it also sets the basis for assessing to what extent these changes are taking place, which we will talk about in the next element. And a good example of why results chains are important come from this admittedly fictional example from a trade facilitation program which trains government staff and organizes workshops, thinks there will be some kind of miracle, and then exports to Europe will increase. And although obviously fictional, this is not too far from what happens in some development programs, where they're very clear about the activities and the eventual impact, but not really how the two connect. So the aim of a results chain is to fill in that missing gap. Okay, elements 2 and 3 are to define and measure indicators. Indicators need to be derived from the logic of the results chain. So this is where having set up your results chain allows you to see exactly what you need to measure in order to see whether the expected changes are happening or not. And indicators are typically quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative indicators will tell what's happening, the degree of change, while qualitative indicators will tell the story of how this change is happening, why it's happening, and how sustainable it is, often. We move on to element 4, which is to assess attribution. So attribution is often a challenge for development programs, but it is a key part of the standard. And the basic idea is really simple. Let's say that your impact is increased yield, or one of your outcomes. If farmers increase their yield, was this because of your intervention, because the weather improved, or for any other reason? And you can see this on the right, where we've kind of listed a schematic results chain, change 1, change 2, and change 3. And at every level, there are other influences on this. And you want to distinguish what's coming from other influences and what's coming from your own program. So good practice in, sorry. I had a breakfast cereal bar, which turned out to be extremely biscuity and has got slightly stuck in my throat, but we can carry on. Okay, so good practice in attribution. Measurement approaches need to be good enough, not perfect. So people talk a lot about, for example, randomized control trials. These are useful in some situations, but they are not applicable in all. And the key with the standard is to do what is practical and applicable, not to reach some kind of theoretical perfection. But what you are expected to do every time is to trace changes through the results chain. This means gathering data to support every link in the results chain, and also to support the connection between the links. So if you think increased use of inputs leads to increased yield, validate, does increased use of inputs actually happen? And then validate, does increased yield actually happen? And then see what evidence you can find to connect the two. And there are lots of ways to find this evidence. Qualitative information gathering is obviously essential. That's basically asking stakeholders what happened and why. So you might ask farmers if they had an increase in yield and what they think the reasons for that were. You might ask businesses why they changed their business practices. Comparison groups are often used, although not appropriate in every situation. This would involve finding a group who are exactly like your target group, except they didn't participate in the intervention. So, for example, a group of farmers who are identical but didn't work with the business to increase their input use. And trend analysis involves looking at the rate at which an indicator is changing. For example, if it changes by 5% a year for the last 10 years, and suddenly, as soon as you start work, it increases by 10%, this implies that there might be some attributable impact. Okay, moving on. Competition rate. How many elements in the DCED standard for results measurement? You have, Sajib answered almost before I finished reading out the questions, so congratulations, Sajib. And thanks to those who gave private messages. 8 is the right answer. Okay, element 5 is systemic change. This is the idea, this is a recommended part of the standard, not mandatory. And it is for programs not just to measure their direct impact, but also assess the extent to which they're changing systems. And this is really based on the idea that if you give a man a fish, he will eat for a day. If you give a man a fishing rod, he will eat for I guess, until the fishing rod breaks. But if you set up a system where he can buy fishing rods from the local shop and get information on how to fish from local extension workers, then he will be able to feed himself the rest of his life. So rather than looking at just the direct impacts, you should look at the broader system that your target beneficiaries are working with and aim to facilitate change in that. Systemic change is very important. It's also very tough to assess and something programs struggle with, which is why this is a recommended rather than mandatory element of a standard. And we do have another webinar on this on the 20th of November. Okay, the next two elements are very easy, tracking costs and reporting results. Programs need to track their costs in order to put their achievements into context, and they should produce an annual report which describes what results they have done. And most programs get this before starting applying the standard. And finally, element 8 is maybe the most important element, managing the system for results measurement. So and this answers a common criticism of monitoring systems, that they just collect information and leave it to sit on a shelf gathering dust. A program that does that would not be compliant with the DCED standard. So an effective program should use the information that they're collecting to adjust their approach as they go, guiding information from overall strategic choices to detailed implementation methods. And this is a challenge to do. It's not within the culture of many organizations. And so to work successfully, as well as a good system, it needs an appropriate culture which rewards this transparency and honesty. Okay, so those are the 8 elements of the standard in a nutshell. I'll say briefly something about audits. So your use of the DCED standard can be audited, and this happens at 2 levels. First, you can have a pre-audit review, where a consultant will come, look at your program, give it a traffic light rating for its compliance with the DCED standard, and also give you advice on how to improve it. That's the first step. If that goes well, you can move on to a full audit, in which case 2 pre-qualified auditors, experienced consultants, will come and give your program a score for how well it complies with the DCED standard. In order to do so, the DCED standard is broken down into control points and compliance criteria. So this is an example within element 8. Every element has several control points, which are kind of like the objectives. And each control point has several compliance criteria, which are like the indicators. So each indicator is scored, and that will give you an overall score for the program. So if you really want to see how this works, please go onto our website where you can download the DCED standard itself, which has all of this information. And in audit, the main benefit is it can bring additional credibility to your results measurement system, giving confidence to donors, other external stakeholders that your system is really performing well. And finally, why should you be interested? The DCED standard will help programs articulate what they're doing, what they hope to achieve, and what assumptions they rely on. So this is through the use and the kind of continual revision of the results chain. And by using the results chain and measuring in a targeted way based on it, there's the potential to use results to improve your programs and have a greater impact. It brings recognition as being really engaged in results measurement. You tap into a community of expertise and guidance, and people who join webinars and share their experience. So that's very useful. And it is increasingly demanded by donors as to give them confidence that projects are measuring results in the right way and also using them well to improve their work. So there are resources online. Please go to our website, enterprisedevelopment.org. If you're looking for one thing to read, try to look for the 2014 Reader on Results Measurement. And on the 20th of November, there will be a webinar on systemic change. So if you're interested in that, please sign up. So now I think we pass to Sharoz from MDF, who will introduce us to his experience in the market development facility. Hi, Sharoz.
Can anyone hear me? Hello? Can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, we
great.
are hearing.
Okay, great. Greetings from a rainy Suva. It's quite a gloomy weather here in Suva, Fiji. So I hope I'll be able to do justice to this program. Thanks, Adam, for describing what the standard stands for. My name is Shahrose. What I'm going to do is basically talk to you about the standards about MDF. So first of all, let me start off by talking about what is MDF. MDF is a multi-country initiative. It is supported by the Australian government. We are implemented by Cardno on its behalf. We started in Fiji back in 2011. A year later, we started in Timor-Leste, and then in 2013, we started in Pakistan. MDF is all about market development, basically where we work with market systems. We try to make the market systems work better in a way that is more inclusive. We implemented the DCED results measurement standards as part of our results measurement, and that is what our presentation is all about today. Okay, so what are we going to cover in today's presentation? Essentially three issues. First is the issue of the value. As a program, what do we get by implementing this standard and by making it as part of a program design? Means the DCED standard was part of a program design. The second point is what was our experience in rolling out this results measurement system? How is it positioned within our system? And the third issue is some of the tips that we've learned as we have started implementing this system. What should we do? Some of the questions that we have received from other people who are interested about the standard. We end up this presentation by giving a small example of one of our interventions, and hopefully that illustrates how we have gone about implementing this standard. All right. So the value. Essentially, when you start a program, like a market development program, there are various issues, there are various challenges that a program faces, and these challenges are quite, significant in the sense that it could actually make or break the program. You might have a program that's very successful or unsuccessful based on how some of these issues go out. For example, there's always this issue about how much ownership do you want? Do you want the program to fund in terms of approach? Do you want the program to take on the lead and start implementing, or do you want the private sector to take the lead? There are questions faced regarding staffs. Like, do you want the external consultants to come in and drive the process, or do you want local ownership to build so that they understand and slowly drive the process? These are some of the balances a program management has to go for. Same goes for steering. Sometimes you have country steering committees who are taking decisions for the program, and while they advise, but sometimes that also brings in a lot of question about who takes the decision. Should it be the management who takes the decision? Should it be done by the board? These are again issues that need a discussion and deliberation, and it differs. And from country to context, it differs in that respect. Same could be talked about operations. Who approves those decisions? Is it within the project, or is it beyond the project? So these are questions that have different answers in different contexts. And as a program that is implementing market development, you have to find the right answers to have the right balance to implement this. But when it comes to results measurement, you have a system that you can fall upon, a system that is tried and tested. As Adam had said earlier, and as Jim has elaborated, about 100 projects are implementing this. So you have a rich experience to fall back on to say, okay, how is the standard being implemented? Where should it work? How should it manage? Who should manage? What are the tools? What are the framework? All of that essentially lends itself to by saying that, what are the good practices that should be done? So if you are subscribing to the standards, essentially what you're getting is a key to good development practices. You are getting, these are the best ways a project should implement. These are the ways that they can get rewarded, and this is how a program can be more successful as it implements the standard. So the essential point is that when you have a when you're following the systems, you are following a good international development practice. Competition break. What are the names of the countries where MDF is currently present? So for those of you who are listening, that's a pretty easy answer to provide. So while you're typing in, Okay, I think there are. Okay.
We already have at least one winner.
Okay, so you've got to respect, as Adam pointed out. So moving on, how is MDF positioned within MDF? And what we have done is a small pictorial, an image, which tries to capture how it's positioned. Now, in the center, that is the core of what we do. We have interventions on the ground where we try to change the systems in the sectors, and that results in inclusive growth leading to poverty reduction. The very essence of what it does is at the center. Now, there are two sides of the same coin on the side. One is the learning aspect of it, one is the communicating aspect of it. So as you start implementing, there are a lot of things you have to do for within MDF. Practices that we have kind of subscribed to is that as you start interventions, you have to develop a concept note where you talk about how does this lead to this. You have to talk about results chain. Now, how does this whole impact results to poverty reduction? If you remember what Adam was saying, you relate that these are some of the areas where the standards we're talking about, identifying the result chain, finding the indicators, measuring the indicators, attributions. Now, these are all the aspects that you will see on the left-hand side where we're talking about results chain, we're talking about intervention plans, we're talking about sector cycles. Now, having this chain by itself is one part of the puzzle. It needs to be relooked or revised as we go along. That ensures the relevance of our system. That's what this whole thing is about. If you have an intervention on the ground, we need to constantly be monitoring it. And having the system, current system, helps you get those right information at the right time. On the left is some of the, as I was saying, these are some of the tools and frameworks that we employ to help us make sure that our interventions that we're designing stay relevant and result in the impact that we desire. And as I was trying to say, that this is what the system is all about. So this helps us plan, have the right interventions. As you can imagine, this is an exercise that happens very frequently. There are some of these things that happens for us every 6 months, but some that happens as it happens. This feeds into the whole reporting cycle of it, which is much more periodic, which we are now living as communicating. Now, we have our semester report, we have our annual reports. This is where we talk about what has the results have achieved. So results measurement is two aspects. One is the reporting side of things, that this is what, as a donor, that you have invested in MDF, and this is what the results are getting. But more importantly, we use these results in a real-time manner to make sure that the interventions we design keep updated and continue to remain relevant. So it is a learning and a communicating tool. I think that's the whole beauty of this DCED results measurement system. It allows you to not only use this system, but also to talk to report the system on the report on the system as well. So overall, it has a two purpose. One is the planning purpose, helping us decide in the right possible manner, and then also report periodically. In terms of how we have used this system in rolling it out, there are a lot of processes that we have followed. And now what I'm trying to just highlight are some of the major ones. First, we needed to have a manual which described how we're going to implement all the frameworks, the procedures that we've talked about in the previous slide, who's going to do the responsibility, when are we going to do so. That's all written in the results measurement manual. There's the results measurement manager who is ensuring that the manual is being looked up to. We also look into the manual and time to time just to ensure the relevance of the manual remains true to the context that we're facing. There are results measurement specialists in all the countries. As I had said earlier, MDF is a multi-country facility. We're in Fiji, we're in Timor, we're also in Pakistan. So you have one person looking after the whole results measurement aspect, and then you have results measurement specialists in all separate countries. To date, we have around 6 staff, just to give you an extent of how many staffs are involved. 6 staffs out of a total 31 who are involved in results measurement. As a rule, whenever staff join our process, they go through the internal training on what results measurement are. So there's an intensive training that we provide them, And on the job, they are exposed to the results, the whole training itself. They are exposed to how to graph the chain. They're involved in the baseline. They're involved in reporting, and they're also involved in the whole sector cycle, where we review all the sector strategies and make sure that they're part of the whole system. What are the processes that we have in place? As I was saying earlier, we have baselines, sector assessments. We have strategies, which we design and we revise on a periodic manner. For each of our interventions, we have intervention guides, which talks about intervention results chain, how does it lead to impact. We have indicators, we have attribution strategy, we have measurement strategy, and all of that actually gives the whole team a good idea of how to go about implementing the system, and also how to measure and capture the impact as it so happens. The same applies to the sector guides as well. Sector guides is basically an elaboration of the whole sector strategy itself, like how does all intervention lead up to the impact that is desired. And then in the sector cycle meetings, that's the time when we sit back and review all the findings. You take a back seat saying, okay, we've been working on this sector for some time now. What are the findings? Where are we right now? Are we still doing the right things? What needs to be changed? So that's the process by where we try to make sure that the overall game plan remains same and remains effective. As you can imagine, for you to do these kind of things, there's a trail of documentation that needs to be kept, and you need to follow a good. You need to be present in the field. You need to be out there talking with the farmers, talking to your beneficiaries, talking to your service provider to make sure whatever is happening, and you have the right source of information. It's not that you're sitting at a desk and making all the decisions. It needs to be backed up by field data. So the system gives you the framework, and as you implement the framework, you will start to receive information, and then it's up to you to make those information choices and make the right decisions. So that has been some of our experience as we have rolled out the standards across all the country. Moving on to the third, so we've talked about the value of the system. We've talked about how it is positioned within MDF, and how we have rolled it out across different countries. The last topic that we wanted to cover was some of the tips that we have learned as we have gone about implementing this. Is that one of the first questions that we hear people say, results measurement DCED standard must be very document heavy. Well, the answer is no, it's not document heavy. Yes, a certain level of paper trail is required, but it is generally up to us, the project, to define how much we need. It's not that we need for everything a huge emails, minutes, everything is also a documentation. So it's up to the project to define how it keeps those documentation. The next question that we hear about is, as Adam was kind of saying earlier, you have to do expensive surveys, you have to do very expensive RICTs, randomized control trials and everything. Again, yes, the practice needs to be good enough, but it doesn't need to be perfect. As long as you have a very good justification that based on the resources that you have and based on good research practices, this is what you have followed, that goes. And the standard recognizes that. Are the results more credible if the standard is used? Again, as Adam said earlier, yes, it does give a lot of credibility. It gives a lot of credibility. It also provides you, let's not forget about the fact that because it's based on good practice, also it's a good practice for a project to implement this system. It allows the project to make use of the information it collects and make better decisions. It is not a reporting tool. It is more a management tool. So obviously it's a very good tool to have. Does it facilitate learning? Well, as I had spoken earlier about the slide, we talked about learning and communicating. The RM system is a discipline. It's comprised of procedures, it's comprised of processes, and it helps you make sure that it gets you the right information at the right time. And when you do that, it automatically facilitates learning. You understand if an intervention is going in the right way, or if the intervention requires more revision so that it remains more relevant. So in terms of learning, you understand, you make much more effective interventions. Or if for some reason the intervention is not working properly, it actually allows you to take the decision at the right time to say, okay, we thought it would make sense, but based on market conditions, certain things have changed. It is no longer practical to continue to do this intervention. Bottom line, it allows the project to learn from its interventions and improve on it. A common idea among many people who have not been exposed to the system is that, in terms of responsibility, it is generally first thought that naively thought that, okay, it must be the responsibility of the RM person to implement the system. Well, nothing could be more wrong than that. It is the responsibility of everyone. That is a very crucial aspect of the whole system. Yes, there are RM persons in this structure, and they are responsible for certain key function. But at the end of the day, everyone is responsible. Everyone needs to own this intervention, this whole system. Everyone has their own fair share of work and responsibilities, and only when it is subscribed by everyone, then that's when the advantage of getting the system really kicks in. It's one of the key systems that helps the project decide on tracking and learning from them, and then taking corrective actions wherever necessary. So it is everyone's responsibility to implement the system. I want to end my presentation with a small example of one of our interventions. This is a very simplified version of our intervention. The real intervention is much more, it's not so linear, let's just put it that way. Giving a brief of this intervention, we've worked with this potential exporter who wanted to set up a factory to export kava flavored drink. Kava is the name of a plant in Fiji, and the kava has this relaxing effect on people. So he came up with this innovative idea of producing a kava flavored drink, targeting the anxiety and the stress market in US and Australia and other countries. So there is huge potential for that. So based on that, the factory, MDF supported the factory in terms of establishing it and getting the supply chain in order. The output was, as the companies would started to export, they would these countries, their volumes of requirement for kava would decrease. The nursery would be supplying better seedlings to farmers, and then the farmers would be planting, and then at the end, as the volumes of the factory goes up, the volumes sold by the farmers would also go up, and then be additional jobs. So that was the win-win situation. Now that's how we started. As part of the process, what we do, we have to do is we do baselines, and we also do interim assessments where we try to see, is it going as per plan? Now what we found out here was that, as far as the interim assessment was concerned, was that there was a lot of reluctance on farmers on selling their products to the exporter, and that was largely an education problem and largely a transparency issue. It was not that the fact there was no demand, just that farmers were somehow not getting the right information, or they were slightly apprehensive regarding weighing measures and other issues. It was mainly more an education issue. Now what was interesting was that this was something that the exporters was not realizing, and he was struggling. But since we were out in the field trying to find this information, it helped us understand, okay, this is something that we need to address. So we went back to the exporters and we said, okay, you have a problem over here. Unless this happens, your company will not achieve its target, and the overall goals of this project might not be achieved. So based on the discussion, we said, okay, the exporter now needs to hire a farm manager whose job was to go out to the farmers and educate them and explain them what are the issues and how the buying and selling takes place. It's a very simple issue, but it was a very critical issue for us to find that out at the right time. Based on that, the farmers are now starting to understand the whole business, and we're seeing an increase again in the sales to that export company. So just an illustration of how, by implementing this system, you get to design an intervention that is more effective and much more efficient in getting the results that you are trying to achieve. And I would suggest that all of you visit our website, which is www.marketdevelopmentfacility.org. You have our latest information. You can also download our annual aggregations of results. Adam had talked about reporting results as something many projects choose to do. We are one of those projects. So we have uploaded our results in our website. We hope to do that again in the coming year, in about February and March next year, with our more up-to-date results. Thank you.
Sheraz, thank you very much. That's fantastic. We've got a few questions actually, but I suggest that we first of all take Benedictus's question about the understanding of a facility type of intervention, because I think that's just different use of terminology, perhaps. Harold, if you are able, Harold, also from MDF, to pick up that question from Benedictus and just clarify maybe different types of facility.
Hello, everyone. This is Harold, and MDF is a multi-purpose facility, so I'm talking from Lahore in Pakistan, where the sun is actually shining. Yeah, the word facility is maybe can be interpreted in different ways. The way we work is as follows. Right? So this is a market development facility. This means that in each country in which we operate, we start off by identifying suitable sectors for growth, for pro-core inclusive growth, based on a number of criteria such as scale, ability to grow further, relevance in relation to, say, national development strategies. And in those sectors, we first do an assessment, and we try to understand if there's a growth potential, why it is not fully realized, and what are the constraints. That assessment leads to a strategy, sort of a conclusion, basically, and from there on, we start implementing that particular strategy. And what we do then, and with whom, is related to what that strategy dictates. So say if the one issue that you often find in agriculture is that farmers do not have sufficient access to, say, high-quality seeds, then we will search for a partner who is able to start importing seed or start improving the quality of the seed or somehow increasing the volume of seeds available in the market. Once we find such a partner, with that partner we negotiate a partnership agreement to allow that partner to take certain steps which then influence the market, which lead to a measurable result in terms of more high-quality seeds in the market, more high-quality seeds being used, which then should translate into better income, for instance. So facility in our context is not about, we are an office and everyone can come to us with requests and proposals. Everything starts with our own in-house analysis. Everything we do is, as a result, sort of based on that evidence, on that analysis, and where the results measurement system comes in, that allows us to constantly sort of update and refine that analysis.
Harold, thank you. Let me, that's very useful. Let me go to Adam next, and the question from Padam, which is, how is the standard different from other similar practices? Adam.
Cool. Thanks, Jim. And thanks, Padam, for the question. So I think it's worth saying that nothing about the DCED standard is completely new or massively off the wall. So things like results chains, good measurement, looking at attribution, even looking at like market systems have been talked about by program staff and monitoring and evaluation people for years. And the results chain in some ways is trying to do a similar thing to what the log frame is doing, although it allows a lot more flexibility and a lot more detail than a log frame can. But although this has been talked about for years, it's often not done, and monitoring systems in programs that have been and remain often extremely bad. So I'll say what's really different about the DCED standard is it puts the kind of minimum acceptable monitoring and evaluation system together in a very clear, auditable format that programs can use, firstly, to take a system off the shelf, which I don't think there is any equivalent, which they can use. And secondly, through the use of the audit or pre-audit, gives the right incentives and guidance for staff to do good monitoring and evaluation.
Excellent, thanks, Adam. Excellent, thanks, Adam. Let's go to Sharaz, who can answer the question from Rani. What types of costs do we need to track? Would the costs of the intervention include costs borne by the private sector and other partners? And if yes, how do we track third-party costs? So, Sharaz.
That the project incurs in terms of intervention costs. So those are the costs that we need to track. Essentially, what the whole question is, how much are you putting in and as an input to the whole system? So while it's good to track how much private sector investment has been leveraged, and that's good to sometimes report as a side, but as far as the DCED standards go, when it comes to costing, it's more about the internal costs within the project activities. Hope that clarifies it. So it's not about third-party costs as such.
Excellent, thank you. Harold, could we come to you on the question on feedback loops? How does, I can't find the question now. Yes, how does the DCED standard embrace and help apply the concept of feedback loops in projects so that interventions and staff time are constantly assessing and evaluating to respond to market dynamics? Harold, can you pick that one up?
Sure, thanks, Tim. Yes, feedback loops are, I guess as you are hearing, very important. We work in very dynamic environments. Those environments are sometimes complex, and hence, we don't know everything about those in detail. And it's also sometimes just very difficult to predict exactly how people will respond to certain changes. So we need to constantly assess what we are doing. I think the DCED sort of institutionalized this at two levels. In a very practical manner, we are expected, as Sharon started to explain, on a very regular basis to literally see where we are. So we do that every half year. Every half year, the team working in a particular sector will block off some time, not only to assess, how many farmers say yes to a question and how many farmers say no to a question, but particularly sort of what does this mean? Why do we see the kind of results that we see? And in addition to that, what other kind of dynamics are we seeing that maybe before we didn't see or we didn't pay enough attention to? So every half a year we take stock, and that from there on we might change a strategy, or we might change an intervention with a particular partner, or we might have inspiration to do new things. On top of that, I think what the DCED standard reinforces is what all of us call a culture of honest inquiry. If you join MDF, then literally within weeks, you are doing interviews in the field. You will go to the field to do a sector assessment or be part of evaluations. The point is we want to encourage people to understand a sector in all its complexity and dynamics in detail. Because we think that is safeguards, is a fundament for the quality of work that we do. And that comes back, I think, in the way the DCED standard has been designed. One of the building blocks of the DCED standard is that if you would be audited, the auditor would want to talk to the implementers and understand whether they understand the sectors they are working in, whether they are familiar with the partnerships they are managing, not only the paperwork, so to speak, but also the realities in the field. And on top of that, as Charles already mentioned, once you are implementing a partnership, you don't do that from behind your desk. You do that by combining desk work with going to the field on a very regular basis, which means that everyone in your organization travels quite a bit, gets a lot of field exposure, and all that makes us sort of constantly, I think, upgrade our understanding of the sector in which we are working.
Harold, thank you very much. Let's go to Ronnie's question. Could the DCED standard be used for non-market development programs? If yes, how? Would it need significant adjustments, or can it be used as is? We get asked that a lot. Short answer is that, as Adam said, most of it is good practice. There are various other fields like vocational training where they've actually developed their own version of the standard, which looks very like the standard and has one or two very minor changes. For instance, the indicators are different, but the basic techniques are the same. There's a couple of categories of projects where you could perhaps say that a theory-based, something that's based on the theory of change, is less easy to use. One category would be reform of the business environment, where you may be doing something that's necessary, but it's not sufficient to cause a change. So you change the environment, but there's other things that need to happen before you really see good things come out at the other end. And that's less easy then, of course, to track the changes, because there may not be any in the short to medium term. Another category is where the results chain is very different in every case. For instance, in microfinance, you may have, every borrower would use the loan in a different way. So your theory of change after the making of the loan is different, and you need probably statistical techniques or something like that to go beyond access to the service and use of service to the impact it has on the ground. But by and large, we find certainly all market development programs and challenge funds in particular can use the standard broadly as it stands. So that's a quick comment on that. Let's go to Sharaz for the question from Jan about Sharaz, you say you don't do surveys, but you do baselines. What's the difference? If you don't do surveys at all, or are they low-cost fit-for-purpose type surveys? So Sharaz, maybe you could pick that one up.
Baselines are part of the dimensions when you do it beforehand. So what I was trying to say is that not necessarily you have to do very expensive surveys, like, if you interview about 200 people, 1,500 people, you have to be perfectly in system, randomized control. What I was trying to mention was that based on the resources that you have, based on the good research practice, sometimes you might say qualitative sampling is good enough. In those cases, that's one way to go. So we do rely on surveys and baselines. So apologies if I came out differently. Yes, we do surveys and baselines. We do interim assessments. These are the same thing, baselines. These are surveys, are tools for us to get our baseline figures, or interim assessment, or post-impact assessment. So there's a lot of quantitative information that we collect. There's a lot of qualitative information we collect in terms of focus groups, in-depth interviews, and all of that feeds into our process of understanding the intervention better, designing it better, making sure it implements better, and then reporting it correctly. Hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Sharaz. That's great. Harold, a question from Padam. How do we measure qualitative indicators? There was mention of qualitative indicators, and you offered to answer that one. So let's hear what you have to say.
All right. Yes. Qualitative research, qualitative indicators. I think they are essential in this line of work. Because if we would do a simple survey and we would come to the conclusion that 50% of the farmers is purchasing a better quality of seed and 50% of the farmers isn't purchasing a better quality of seed, we know something, but we actually would like to know much more. We would like to know why that 50% didn't go for it. So which means we'll always try to work with mixed methods. So there is room for surveys, but there's definitely also room for more qualitative research techniques, so say in-depth interviews or focus group discussions. Those are more, say, time-consuming, labor-intensive. So we will do a small sample of that, and maybe then a larger sample of a slightly simpler research tool to get feedback from a larger group of respondents. But we always will insist to use these qualitative research tools to get a much better sense for why do we see what we see. And well, I think that answers the question. So qualitative data comes from qualitative research methods, and by mixing those into the mix of research tools, you are able to get the kind of information you're looking for.
Okay, thanks, Harold. That's great. Let's come to Andrew's question. Is it possible to give some indication of the frequency and cost of external auditing? Adam, maybe you could pick that one up.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. It's a good question. So in terms of frequency, it's possible to have at the beginning of your project a system in place audit. This audit looks at not how well you've used the system because it's right at the beginning and you haven't used it yet, but just how good the system is. So we have had one system in place audit so far, but it's not necessary. A pre-audit review can be done at any time during the program, and that's organized between the program and the consultant you choose to do it. So the DCED doesn't get involved in that. You can do that at any time. And then a full audit would normally come after, I think, at least 2 years of the program. So you've kind of started to use your system, you've got some results which we can look at. And so those are the three options. In terms of cost, reckon on a consultant's time for a couple of weeks for a pre-audit review. For a full audit or a system in place audit, it would be we ask 2 consultants to come to improve the, robustness of the audit, and the amount of time they spend will really depend on the size of your program and how much you want them to audit. Most programs audit a selection of their interventions rather than all of them, but the cost is low compared to the size of programs. We did a very brief stock take recently, and it came to like a fraction of a percent, 0.2 or 0.3% of total program budget.
Adam, thank you. We're running out of time a little bit here. But let's see, Wolfgang asks, in our project for establishing tree plantations for chosen species of grain, but it takes 7 to 8 years, which is longer than the duration of the project, of course. Income generation is one of our desired outcomes, but we can't measure it within the duration of the project. I think this is a particular strength of an approach or a framework such as the DCED Standard, because basically what it does is provide the setting for a program to set out the logic of the tree planting and identify milestones along the way in the logic. So obviously the ultimate outcome is that trees get planted and income gets boosted, but on the way to that there's quite a few changes, I would guess, that are expected to happen in communities and things that people are, it is hoped, will do. And some assurance can be given to the donor that things are moving along in the right track if the intermediate outcomes are flagged up, agreed, and monitored and checked on as they happen. I think this is what was missing in the past, was that in the log frame format, the sequencing of outcomes got rather stripped out and ignored. But in reality, we all know that some outcomes have to happen before other outcomes can happen. And therefore, being very explicit about what those are and how they are expected to happen and when is very helpful. So obviously there's no perfect answer to that, because until the trees actually mature and get harvested and incomes increase, then nobody knows for sure. But at least we can have some assurance on the way. Right, we've got a couple more questions. We've got Jen says, can MDF capture private sector funds and input leveraged by the use of donor funds? Sharaz, I wonder if you could pick that up.
Sure. Well, let's first, the question was, can MDF capture private sector funds and input? Most definitely. The core of what MDF does is about working with private sector. It's about cost sharing. It's about having more ownership in the private sector. So what we put in, we also measure what is the input that the private sector has put, and we report that to DFAT. The amount that the private sector puts in is also an indication of how much buy-in you're getting. So that is also one of the deliverables and reporting thing that we do to report to our post in SUVA. The results measurement, the guideline, basically, as I said, you define your own indicators and you report on that. So this is one of the core elements of core aspects of what we do, and we report on that to DFAT.
Shiraz, thank you. One more final question for Harold from Michaela. What are the key challenges and pitfalls in implementing the DCED standard, or are they similar to the establishment and implementation of other M&E systems? Harold, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Thanks. I think the core of what makes the DCED standard is that results measurement becomes a form of quality control implemented by the implementers in the organization. That has a huge benefit because people understand, I think, the nature of their work much better. And frankly speaking, I think it's almost impossible to run these organizations without having this kind of this quality management system running in the background. I think there are two main challenges. One is, as Sharaz started to explain, keeping it practical. Research, you can spend a lot of time on research, and ultimately, of course, our objective is not to become a research organization, but an organization that does the right things, informed by an appropriate amount of research. So keeping it real, keeping it practical requires making the right trade-offs on a daily basis. That needs to be kept in check, otherwise it gets too complicated. I think the second thing in relation to that is we need to build an organization who has that analytical capacity. And not everyone is equally comfortable with doing research. So the more you build an organization with the right kind of people who are able to work with the system, the easier and the more efficient it gets. But as I mentioned earlier, that's maybe not equally easy in every country, for instance, in which we work, but at the same time, it's unthinkable not to have a system like this in place.
Harold, thank you. That's fantastic. So we've come to the end of the hour, so I think we'll wrap up there, but thank you very, very much for all your questions. I think we might have missed one or two, but we've answered as many as we could. Do, of course, send any questions to the Secretariat or let us know if there's some way that we can assist you going forward. Congratulations to Sajib Sen, who is the most recent signing up for our Systemic Change Seminar, I see, webinar. And thank you all for joining. Thank you to our presenters, to Sharaz, Harold, and Adam. And thank you to all of you for joining, and good luck, and stay in touch. Bye for now.